So it's my great pleasure to introduce Rhythm Sachdeva, who, and I have to, full accounting here, she was one of my students and one of my very good students. So nice to see you. She's come a long way from when I was marking her papers, which were quite clear. Basically, she is now what is called an early career journalist. She's worked here and there, very prominent places, the Star, Canadian Press, CTV, Post Media. She is now a global journalism fellow at the Dalla Lana School of Public Health, which, if you don't know about that, the journalism component of that university department, it's really doing some interesting thing, run by a former Wall Street Journal correspondent in Hong Kong, I believe, Rob Steiner. And what he is doing there is he is getting people from non-journalistic backgrounds to do journalism about their areas of expertise, whether it's medicine or psychology. And Rhythm is helping craft their stories from being purely where they come from to doing something that is more understandable to a mass audience. She's now working with the Investigative Journalism Bureau at the School of Public Health. And she's done some amazing stories on the immigration landscape in Canada, how immigrants are invited into the country and then kind of basically abandoned, and the relationship between healthcare professionals and lobby groups, which I think is really terrific. So, Rhythm, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. I feel really privileged to be here today to talk to you guys about my experience. And I think it's important for someone who looks like me with my background to be here, because I think what's going on with early career journalists is something that needs to be talked about. So let's get to it. You already got my introduction. These are some of the places that I have worked in over the past 3 years. It has been incredibly gratifying, and I wouldn't change a thing, honestly. It was incredible. And the experiences I take with me, the skills I take with me, and the wonderful colleagues I take with me, I think they're going to stay with me for the rest of my life. And I think that journalism has changed my life, and I would love to stay. There are some reasons, though, that I wonder if I should. So we know the good. I would like to talk about the bad. Unfortunately, I think what's happening in journalism with the layoffs is, it's bringing a lot of problems into greater attention. You might have seen the headlines with the most recent Bell Media layoffs, the most recent Post Media layoffs, and in the United States, how Vice Media no longer exists. So I think that I would like to talk to you from my experience personally, and I'd like to tell you some of the things that I've experienced that I wish was talked about more in J school. I wish was talked about more, in newsrooms. So I'd like to talk about the rise of the permalancer. What's a permalancer? So a permalancer is a freelance journalist who works at a company and does the exact same duties as any other permanent employee. They work 5 days a week, they work 8 hours a day, and they are, they're doing the job. They're writing, they're sometimes they're anchors, sometimes they're broadcast journalists. However, their contract says freelance, which means they don't get benefits. It means that they do not have access to, future permanent contracts. They don't know if they'll ever get one. At CTV News, I was a permalancer for a whole year. And the thing is, I didn't even know that I was signing up to be a freelancer until my first week of work. My contract was unclear, and no one made it clear to me because I wasn't educated enough about the concept at the time. It was only my second year in journalism. I had a company laptop. I had a company bio. You could Google my name and my name would come up at the CTV employee site with a picture of me and my qualifications. It wasn't until a month in that I realized that I was one of many freelancers competing for maybe 2 or 3 permanent jobs that would be available in the next few years. And I think the impact this has on the quality of journalism, the impact this has on how much I can give and how much other journalists can give when they're worried if they'll have a job next month, next year, or whether they can go to the doctor and have their benefits. It's not to be understated. I think at any given day, according to the Review of Journalism, CBC employs over 2,000 casual staff every single day. These are contract workers. These are workers who are known as temporary casual workers whose contract changes per month, per year, sometimes per week. They don't know if they'll have something to fall back on. And they don't know, whether they'll be gone tomorrow. They don't really have any rights. But they make up a significant chunk of CBC's news staff. And they make up, I think, a lot of the great news we read today. Some of the award-winning investigative work CBC has produced was created by freelance writers. And I think that what comes with that is, the scary. This is a picture of a man threatening me in the open street in Kensington Market. I was a journalism student at the time. It was my 3rd year, and I was given an assignment to take a picture of a moment, any human moment that's worth it. And the man decided that this would be the opportunity to yell at a journalist about fake news. He was upset and he wanted someone to take his frustration out on. He decided that person would be me. I never felt more scared and panicked in my life than that moment. I was able to move on from it, but I remember not being sure who to turn to. I remember wondering, if this has happened to other reporters, what is the protocol when something like this happens? And I didn't feel supported. This kind of thing has happened and continues to happen in Canadian newsrooms today forever, especially to marginalized reporters. I was a reporter during the peak of COVID-19. I was reporting all the major updates about the vaccines and about the new variants and about everything that's going on in this world. And people were upset. There were a lot of people who were against vaccines and who were against, the news they were reading, and decided that journalists would be the outlet for that anger. I was receiving hate mail on a daily basis. I was receiving death threats, and I was scared. I went out and I bought a second lock. I was jumping every time someone was knocking on my door. And because of how understaffed we were in the newsroom, there was no one to turn to. There was no one available to speak with me because one editor is doing the job of 5, because we don't have the resources to take care of our young reporters. We are creating an environment for them where we tell them, you have to do the work, you have to go out there, you have to push the boundaries. You might not get paid for it. You might not get a contract you can rely on. And you might not, be paid very well. But, if you're scared, that's also your problem. And I worry very much that we are chasing away young talent from something that could be so fruitful. We are creating an environment that's not conducive to people wanting to do their best, to people really pushing boundaries and doing the kind of investigative work that John Kay does. I recently dipped my toe in investigative work. No one looks like me. I am the youngest, and I am the only person of color. And to be honest, I don't know if I am surprised. I don't feel surprised because I can't imagine a lot of young people wanting to stick around long enough to make it to that point. And I think that there are several calls to action that come to mind when I think about, the problems. I was just discussing it just now during our coffee break, but people's attention span is not what it used to be, especially us younger folk. Us younger folk, we are obsessed with TikTok and social media, and we need information in bite-sized form, which is why short-form video storytelling is an incredible thing that more journalists should know how to do and should be trained how to do very early on in their careers. Because if they can't make a 2-minute video telling you what the story is about and telling you why it's important, people are not going to read it. People are not going to come, which is probably primarily why the business models are failing. We don't have active, consistent readership who want to pay the money, monthly money, subscription fee to read the 1,000-word long form investigative work. So you need to go to them in the places where they're going. And I worry that not enough people are taking advantage and leveraging social media the way they should. Canada's Online News Act. So I'm assuming most of you are familiar, but the News Act basically dictates that a lot of Canadian news will no longer be available on Meta. This was initially designed to protect us. But what's happening is that, as I said, the places where people go to get the news is where we can't connect with them. I worry incredibly about the future of Canadian media if this act is not repealed or if, as collectively, we don't come up with a suitable enough alternative. Freelance training. I wish I knew what a freelance contract was, when I'm being exploited and when I'm not. I wish someone told me that this is a contract where they are taking advantage of you. I wish someone told me how to make an invoice. I wish someone told me, that just because I'm a freelancer doesn't mean I can't participate in a union, which is a lie that I was told at some point in my career. There is just so much more to know than, what they tell you. Not to mention, I learned recently in my fellowship that the bar for a pitch as a freelancer is incredibly high. You need to make sure you can prove that you know what you're doing in a very competitive environment. Another thing that a young journalist, a novice journalist might not be familiar with. And we have to recreate our relationships with the public. There's a lot of mistrust out there. And honestly, I'm not here to blame them. There is a reason for that mistrust. And instead of blaming them and instead of like coming after them for, misplaced anger, we need to take a step back and try to recreate our relationship with them. I think Washington Post has had success because they're putting the camera in front of the reporter and be like, tell us how you did this story. Tell us the behind the scenes. Tell us step by step who your sources are and why you're even doing the story and why you would recommend it. And it creates a bit of trust because when people can see your face and they know why you're doing what you're doing, and you're just a person, you're not a big company trying to peddle fake news, it helps. Washington Post is doing better than it was before. And I think that younger people are now finding it a more accessible source of information. And while some organizations are slowly opening up, I don't think we're there yet. I think there's so much more that can be done to really resonate with audiences who are different than the audiences that were prevalent 20 years ago. A couple more things I feel I should mention is the fallacy of neutrality. So they teach you in journalism school that you have to be objective. Being objective is the most important thing.
I never said that.
Jeffrey Dworkin did not say that. Another professor said that. But they do teach you that on some level, on different various levels, really, like the importance of objectivity as a journalist. I was always told I should take myself out of the story, like my opinion is irrelevant. And I tried my best to preach that as a reporter. That being said, I have had a few downfalls. I was working for CTV News. It was a slow weekend. There was not much on. And during these weekends, you can pitch ideas. I decided to pitch an idea about why Canada is, more expensive than other G7 countries. Its cost of living crisis is a trending topic. And I figured it would be interesting for our readers. It didn't occur to me until I was halfway through the story that one of the reasons why Canada is so expensive is because our telecommunications is run by a monopoly, and Bell Media is one of them, the subsidiary of my news organization. I wrote the story anyway. I thought it was interesting. I thought there were some interesting points being covered about, the factors that make Canada expensive. My editor at the time, she were worried, but she said, you know what, maybe it'll be okay. We published it. This story went on to be the most read story of ctvnews.ca for over a week. In the weekend, it just blew up. It was all over Twitter. I woke up in the morning to 100 notifications, and we didn't expect that. On Monday, when I came to work, I was pulled into a meeting and I met with some very angry board execs to let me know that, I've crossed the line and I should have let them know that I was going to talk about Bell Media. And the story, there were all kinds of things suggested, like taking the story down altogether. Eventually, it was rewritten. And I can safely say the rewritten version was not objective. The rewritten version was a story that made Bell Media seem less like a monopoly than it is. And you know what? It's okay. I think I learned my lesson not to bite the hand that feeds me. But I think that it's an example of many stories like this that might not actually, you won't get to read it because objectivity is fine as long as it doesn't hurt an organization's bottom line. And while I understand it's a business, I worry very much, especially considering the recent political climate and the wars going on, about what news we actually get to read and what news that falls under the cracks, because some news organization is worried about their bottom line. And I don't know, I worry a lot. Uh, I would like to talk a little bit more also about below market compensation. A little bit of research before coming here. According to Indeed, the average salary of a mid-career journalist in Canada is anywhere from 55,000 to 65,000. That is the entry-level salary for anyone else in marketing, PR, advertising, any media adjacent role. And it makes sense to me that every few years, some very talented senior editor of mine is leaving to become the senior communications officer of a company or a university, or is joining public relations, or is becoming a copywriter. Maybe because they want to buy a house, or have children, or just do something more than what 55 to 65K a year can afford you. It goes down to 35 to 45 if you're early career, someone in my position. I think what all of this kind of leads up to the question, how is this sustainable? Is this kind of environment, encouraging journalists like myself to keep going and do the stories that, really change the country and, fortify democracy? And it doesn't. I think what's happening is that I'm borrowing this, but a very talented editor of mine said that journalism is no longer a career, it's a monetized hobby. And I think she was onto something. She was definitely onto something. If we keep going this way, if we don't offer the journalists the resources and the salary they need to do the work they need to do, it's going to become a future of part-time freelancers who have full-time jobs and who are doing this because they have a hobby they're passionate about. And it's going to hurt us. We're going to be the country that borrows all our stories from the United States, from the few organizations that still have cash. And we're going to be completely reliant on news wires who are also cutting resources. The Hamilton Spectator recently lost its physical newsroom a couple of months ago, if I'm not wrong. They all have to work from home now. A young female journalist there told me that she felt like a gut punch. She said that, not being able to see my colleagues, not being able to see my editors, I worry if I can keep going, how much can they take from me? And I didn't have an answer. I honestly didn't. And I would like to stay. I think that I have just begun to scratch the surface of the kind of journalistic stories that need to be told. The story that Dworkin just mentioned to you about the sugar lobby group, that was very recent, only a couple of months ago. But that was a testament, in my opinion, of the kind of big story that young journalists are capable of. You don't have to be a senior journalist in his 40s or 50s to pull off an investigative, flashy story. Young reporters can do that with the right guidance, but you need to make it worth their while. You need to make sure they can pay their rent. You need to make sure they feel supported when things hit the roof. And at the moment, it's not looking good. So mine is a short and sweet talk, but I'm going to wrap it up and bring it home and say that I do see a future. I do. I think that, I am starting to see more startup news organizations in Canada pop up. And it makes me optimistic that there will be opportunities for young journalists to be creative and to, push the boundaries. Legacy media, on the other hand, if they keep going the way they're going, it's unlikely that you will see the same quality of journalism you did 10, 20 years ago. It's likely it will continue to reduce.